All right. Welcome back, everyone, to another session. Welcome, Andy. Welcome, Katie. Welcome, Jens. Welcome, Carolina. So happy that you're all joining in once again. Lovely to see you. So this afternoon, we're delighted to invite Ayya Soma to give a Dhamma talk. And Yuri Sid, is that?
Yudi number 2.
Yudi number 2.
Or Yudi number 1, depending on.
The Yudi who comes on retreat here frequently?
They both come on retreat frequently.
Okay, well, hello, Yudi number 1/number 2. Hello, Sally. Glad to see you joining in again. So this afternoon, as I said, Ayya Soma will be giving a Dhamma talk. Yes, I remember you, Yudi, don't worry. Hello, Demi. So Ayya Soma will give a Dhamma talk, and after the talk, everyone is welcome to ask questions. And it's actually a little smoother if you enter your questions during the talk, because then it's easier to go through them at the end. So feel free to type in your questions at any time. Hello, Victoria. Hello, Melvin. Hello, Ella. Good to see all of you as well. So without further prelude, we'll go ahead and pass it over to Ayya Soma. So whenever you're ready, Ayya, please go ahead.
Thank you, Bante. And thank you all for connecting with us today for the weekend retreat on strong emotions. That is the topic. And that is also our experience. As Suzanne was mentioning this morning, it is something that is very much present in her experience at this time. But I would say it's also like a universal topic in the way that it's not particular to the pandemic, but it's something that we always have to deal with in one shape or form throughout our existence as humans. So right now that in these times of pandemic, we are experiencing emotions in a particular way. And when the pandemic will be over, because everything is impermanent, including the pandemic, we will be experiencing strong emotions in a different way. And sometimes we will experience the absence of emotions too. So it's really important to understand what these emotions are before doing anything about it. So the topic of this particular session is actually on having an appropriate response to strong emotions. But that, I would say, is kind of like the later step. So doing something about our experience. But if we don't have an understanding of what our experience is in the first place, there's nothing that we can really do about it. So whenever we go to the doctor does a series of tests, analyzes our experience, our situation, our body, listens to the symptoms that we have. He doesn't go straight away, or they don't go straight away to the medicine. They have to understand, they have to sort of get a diagnosis first. So in the same way, that is what our duty is as practitioners, is to fully understand what our emotional experience is first, and then understanding what is the appropriate response in every single circumstance in order to create different conditions, to experience different conditions in the future. So to shift our day-to-day experience and go closer and closer to awakening until we attain awakening to begin with, and we dispel suffering. So when dealing with the whole subject of understanding emotions, I would say that whenever strong emotions appear, it's almost a sort of blessing because it's very difficult to ignore them. So we ignore most of our experience, including our emotional experience on a daily basis, whether there is a pandemic or there's not a pandemic. But when there are like really strong emotions like anger, for example, or even strong emotions like joy, it's very difficult to ignore them. They usually overcome our entire experience. So we look, first and foremost, our duty is to look at what we are experiencing. And the best way to do that is through Buddhist meditation, so through Buddhist practice. So training our mind to the habit of observing our experience when very little externally is happening. And then becoming more and more acquainted with the workings of the mind. And another way also that we cultivate an understanding of our experience is obviously by learning the Buddhist teachings. So Bhante Sudhaso has spent lots of days now, every single morning, going through the suttas with us. So from Monday to Friday, we have sutta study here at 8 a.m. and a lot of you have joined with us. So that's basically when we are starting to really deeply look into the words of the Buddha, really fully try to understand them and match them with our experience and absorb right view and correct our pre-existing wrong view. Last night, Bhante gave a talk on karma, which was excellent. It delighted my mind. I'm still delighted by that talk. It was very to the point, but so very full of right view. And that right view is so precious because it allows us to really understand what is normally counterintuitive. So I have a little scar on my, I think it's here. Is it here, Bhante? Either here or here.
Yeah.
Here?
Yeah.
So I have a little scar here on my, what do you call this thing?
Eyebrow.
Eyebrow. Thank you. And the way that I got this scar was, I think I was about 4 years old or something, and I was in the playground in Milan, in Italy, playing with this swing, and just there was no one on the swing, and I was just throwing it and learning, I guess, sort of the workings of physics. So I was very curious. I still remember I was very interested in how just by pushing this swing that it would come back, pushing and come back. And then at a certain point, someone called my name and I turned around and I had pushed the swing and the swing came right at me. And I started bleeding and it hurt me intensely. And I think that's when I actually really understood that if I put things in motion, regardless of what I was doing next, I was going to reap the consequences. So in that way, I learned, I had a sort of experiential understanding of physics, so to speak. So I had never opened a book, but I was kind of playing around with the world. And in the same way, I think that Bhante last night really highlighted how the workings of karma. And the reason why I'm bringing up the swing analogy is that most of the time we're completely unaware of the consequences of our actions. So sometimes we are. So we are kind of like, okay, if I push the swing, then it's going to get back. Push, come back, push, come back. But then we get distracted and then we get hit. And then we're surprised that we got hit. We're like, oh, wait, what happened? So there is the cause and consequence. And that's why it's very important to learn the teachings to kind of have a better understanding of the implications of our actions. The first time I read the Majjhima Nikaya, it was, I don't remember the actual sutta, but I remember the Buddha talking about actions through body, speech, and mind. And there was someone who was asking him, so actually, I think it was two spiritual practitioners, if I remember correctly, asking the Buddha, what is worse? Is it worse to have an unwholesome thought, or is it worse to say something unwholesome or do something unwholesome? And I remember my mind clearly going towards, yeah, of course, like either the action or the word. And I believe that one of the two people talking to the Buddha had the same viewpoint. And then the Buddha highlights how the thought, it was much worse to have a thought than to actually do anything unwholesome through action or through speech. And I remember being shocked. I was like, how is that possible? So it's worse to think about killing than to actually kill? Shocking, profoundly shocking. And then the Buddha highlights how the act of killing wouldn't even have happened if the thought wouldn't have arisen in our mind to begin with. Which was an incredible revelation to me. And I remember thinking, wow, this is a lot of Dhamma Sukha in the mind. No different than last night. I was like, oh, I love Buddhism. So full of truth, really profound practical truth, and so intelligent, so wise, but also so counterintuitive. Because we normally look at things after they have happened instead of creating the causes for them not to happen to begin with. And you'll see this also in the religion. There is a lot of talk, for example, about Buddhists not being particularly, Buddhist organizations not being particularly engaged in social action and in charitable work. And I remember thinking, like, that thought arose in the mind when I was in Thailand a few weeks ago. And I come from Italy, where the Catholic Church is can be criticized for a lot of reasons, but definitely does a lot of charitable work. So they feed the poor, they do incredible work with homeless people, and so far and so forth. But what really amazed me while I was in Thailand was that I don't think I ever saw someone who had a hunger problem. At a certain point, I started connecting the dots, and I realized that because everybody brings food to the monastery, if you are in need for food, you can just find it at the monastery. So instead of the monks collecting food and giving it to people outside afterwards, or the Buddhist organizations going to look for the poor people and creating a sort of soup kitchen, instead, everybody shares food together with the monastic community at the monastery. So it's kind of like going to the root of the problem to begin with. not creating the problem to begin with, if you see what I mean. And it also gives a sort of dignity to the charitable operation. So whoever is in need of food doesn't feel like they are the recipients of charity, but rather they're part of something extended with a community that goes from the rich to the poor to the spiritual practitioners. So it was very, very beautiful for me to see that, because it gave me a lot of also lessons in terms of the Dharma, of once again not going towards finding sort of patching up the solutions, but rather creating the conditions for the problems not to arise to begin with. But of course, when it comes to our mind, if you're just a little bit like me, with strong habits, we're already at the stage of the problem is already there. The mind is quite messy, so we need to patch it up. We need to do something about it. There's a lot of suffering in the mind. But it's also very important to keep the idea of not creating the further causes for suffering in mind. So while we are adjusting or shifting, our actions to doing something about our current suffering, we also don't create other causes of suffering for the future. So it's once again going back to, what does the Buddha say about our emotional experience? And we just actually studied it. Studied our experience with Bhante in Sutta study on Friday morning, where the Buddha actually equates the sankharas, and emotions are part of sankharas, as a plantain tree, which, if you're not apparently from Southeast Asia, or tropical countries, you have no idea what it's made like. So for us, it's more useful to take the simile of an onion. So something that looks very consistent and with a core, but fundamentally is just layers after layers after layers after layers. And the consciousness of these emotions being like a magician, the trick of a magician. And I remember once we had a monk, I think it was Bhante Sarananda, who highlighted, I think I had read it over and over again and heard it over and over again, but for some reason, as soon as he said it, it really made a mark in my mind, was that there was no such thing as consciousness, but there was always consciousness of something. Consciousness in relation to something else. So we have that illusion of consciousness, which is the most difficult thing to let go of. But fundamentally, consciousness in and of itself does not exist. It's always in relation to something else. A huge shift in how I've been perceiving my experience ever since. So with this information in mind, we can start really priming the mind to be ready to look at our emotional experience and apply the antidotes. So there is a meditation practice that I think I've been talking about over and over again since we started these live streams. That is one of my main meditation practices, which is mindfulness of emotions, that I find quite useful in becoming acquainted with the sort of physical experience of emotions. Um, and then creating a sort of basis for shifting our actions through body and speech and mind based on the Dhamma, in accordance to Dhamma, which creates a sort of alleviation of our emotional experience, of our suffering. So when it comes to anger that Bhante talked about for, I think, 20 seconds this morning, but which is probably a strong emotion that we've all experienced to a degree or another in these past days. We have to, once again, understand what it feels like, be comfortable with it, understand how poisonous it is, understand the gratification for it, that it has some sort of pleasant experience to it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be indulging in it to begin with. So the Buddha calls it the honey tip with the poison roots. Because if there wasn't that honey tip, we wouldn't be indulging in it to begin with. So it's very important to see the gratification that there is in any kind of mind state that is harmful, including anger. Seeing it. So if we're experiencing anger in meditation, we can just look at it, label it for a second and go, that righteous indignation, very delicious. I am right. It feels really good to be right. But then going deeper, dropping that, and actually really looking at our experience. Is our experience comfortable or not when we're experiencing a strong, harmful emotion like anger? And to one degree or the other, we are all somewhat aware that it is harmful. We kind of already know the answer. Otherwise, it wouldn't be one of like my the most popular talks. Whenever there is like a topic like overcoming anger, lots of people show up during the meditation class, or a lot of people sign up online. But pretty much everyone, including myself, whoever comes and interacts in this sort of environment, always asks the question about those moments when it's acceptable to be angry. So righteous indignation. So there is, once again, we kind of know that it's harmful. Otherwise, we wouldn't sign up to something that we thought was completely ridiculous. But our attachment to views, no, there are certain situations where it's acceptable. No, I really do not want to let go of this thing. And seeing both of these, how does it feel like to be so attached to this sort of wrong view? But also ultimately, actually looking at our experience. Whenever we're having strong emotions, what do they feel like? And when they are so strong, like something so harmful like anger, it's impossible not to notice the dukkha. Where is the dukkha? The dukkha is everywhere. The dukkha is sucking the life out of us, the energy. And when you start realizing how much energy it sucks from you, then you also realize how much it sucks to begin with, to indulge in a feeling like anger. So you become disenchanted with the honey tip. You become disenchanted with the righteousness of your feeling. And also you understand, you start seeing the liberation that comes whenever you're skillful enough not to indulge in the honey tip. the freedom of space and time and energy that comes, that you can dedicate to what you thought was the righteous cause. So ultimately, taking all the energy that you put into developing or indulging in this harmful emotional state and allocating it to something else, which is wholesome for the benefit of yourself and others. Always. No difference. And so you see that when you're skillful at doing these things, the critical thinking, so what quote unquote was the excuse for indulging in the harmful, angry state, is still there. So the critical, intelligent thinking, the acknowledgement of this situation or this person has done something harmful, like whatever it is, the acknowledgement of something inappropriate that is happening is still there, but there's no suffering attached to it. So I'll give an example of when one of my success cases, success stories during my practice, where I was actually really capable of doing this practice of saving up the energy towards skillful action rather than unskillful action. And it was a couple of months ago when, so we have some rescue chickens here at the monastery that are completely free range. And the karma of a chicken is quite interesting because apparently every single being on earth finds them delicious. So there's creeping animals, flying animals, any kind of nocturnal animals, daylight animals, including humans that are constantly looking at chickens as a source of food, a delicious food that they want to kill as soon as possible. So it's been a cause of extreme dukkha, actually, because we've had now chickens for quite a few years, and we've lost two raccoons, and now we have 3 that are still doing all right. But we leave them entirely free range, so they have a pleasant life. But at the same time, some unhappy things can happen if a predator appears. So a few months ago, while they were hanging out in the backyard, at a certain point I hear the chickens yelling like crazy in the backyard, and a dog barking. So I go out and I see this horrible scene of the dogs that had clearly a strong predator instinct, and they were trying to they were seeing the chickens as prey, and the chickens were completely terrified and running here and there. And so the dog had almost gotten one of them. But it was quite interesting because normally in that situation, I would have completely freaked out and my heartbeat would have gone over the top, and I would have started yelling or shouting or like freeze, perhaps. That also has happened several years ago before my Buddhist practice. Like whenever something strong, dangerous would happen, I would just go I would get so overwhelmed by emotions that then I would be petrified. I would not know what to do. But instead, none of that happened, or it happened it just arose, but I didn't pick it up and go with it. But rather, what happened, I was like, oh, fear arising. Oh, anger arising. Oh, agitation arising. Okay. 1 millisecond of awareness that these strong emotions are appearing, and then not attaching to them, but actually thinking, what is the appropriate response right here and right now? So I actually went with pure equanimity towards the dogs. That, by the way, disclaimer, I'm normally quite afraid of dogs. So they're not I'm more of a cat person. So hard, very difficult for me to approach dogs. But I just went there, fearless, and told the dog to stop whatever he was doing. And the dog stopped. Then I went to one of the hens and I picked her up and put her in the coop. Went to the other ones and did the same thing. And the situation was solved in very short amount of time. Then the owners shortly after came to get the dogs. Situation solved. Distress, 0.5%. Beneficial for pretty much every single being involved. And I remember after that going, wow, the Buddhist teachings really work. And then also, oh, wow, well done. Nice pat on the shoulder. I was like, oh, this is great. How skillful you dealt with that situation. Which for me was a first. Whenever I've seen beings in danger, let alone if they were like closely related to me, have I been able to, in the past, I was never able to act skillfully because I would allocate all my energy into indulging in whatever distressful emotion was coming up. So that's when you understand also on an experiential level, through trial and error, you understand, okay, well, this leads to a wholesome result. This leads to an unwholesome result. Okay, so what did the Buddha say? Oh, that doing this leads to a wholesome result. Doing this leads to an unwholesome result. Okay, I'm following the Buddhist teachings. And then when I decide to go like, I'm a little bit suspicious that actually the Buddha is right. So then sometimes I kind of like, turn the things around a little bit. And then I'm like, no, actually, I am quite right. Right now, I'm being oppressed. I'm quite right to be angry. So I indulge in my anger and I'm like, oh, doing this brings to an unwholesome result. I thought it was bringing to a wholesome result, but it actually brings to an unwholesome result. What did the Buddha say again? Oh, he said that it brings to an unwholesome result. Oh, okay. So we always have to approach the practice actually a little bit with the intention to prove the Buddha wrong. Let's see if we can prove the Buddha wrong. I've been trying to prove the Buddha wrong for a few years now because I'm not someone who just goes like, oh, yes. This morning we were talking about like having strong faith. I had to work a lot on my faith. At the very beginning, I was like, yeah, I don't know about that. And actually, that's how I became friends with Bhante Sudaso because I started going to his Dhamma talks and I would always raise my hand at a certain point where like, I don't agree with this. No, I don't think so. No, no, this doesn't sound smart. No. So, and he would patiently like, tell me what the Buddha said and why, what was the context for it. So, of course, in order to prove the Buddha wrong, so to speak, you need to take the teachings as a working hypothesis. Because you can't prove anything wrong or right unless you give it a shot. And that's where faith comes in. So you're like, okay, I take it as a working hypothesis. I try to prove you wrong. By the way, this preview, you're not going to be able to prove it wrong. It's a very, very difficult, impossible pursuit. And you'll see that actually he's right. And that's where your faith builds up. And then you end up shaved with, wrapped up in a blanket. Because you're like, well, I mean, if this man was right in all of this, I'm pretty sure that this other part, he must be right too. The odds are quite high. But yeah, always looking at your experience and comparing it with the teachings is paramount to really fully understand what these beautiful words are all about. And I would like to end, actually, I have a beautiful sutta quote, one of my favorite suttas that I always forget the name, but I just remember that it's Majjhima Nikaya number 2. Bante, who knows everything, will know the name of the title of the sutta. What is the sutta's name?
Sambhasava.
Great, thank you. So the Sambhasava Sutta, which is Majjhima Nikaya number 2, I just remember it because I like to go to that sutta every now and then whenever I have some sort of struggles. And I love it because there is, well, actually, I love the entire sutta. But in particular, I think that this, what I'm about to quote, is our experience most of the time, which is attending unwisely. So pointing our mind to questions and thoughts and considerations that actually that leads to suffering rather than to the cessation of suffering. And it's always, was I in the past? Was I not in the past? What was I in the past? How was I in the past? Having been what? What did I become in the past? Shall I be in the future? Shall I not be in the future? What shall I be in the future? How shall I be in the future? Having been what? What shall I become in the future? Or else, he, she, they is inwardly perplexed about the present us. Am I? Am I not? What am I? How am I? Where has this being come from? Where will it go? So this constant question and worrying about the past, the present, and the future, which shapes more and more our delusion of self-identity and shapes more and more the sort of solidity, the fake solidity of our emotions, thoughts, ideas, etc. And so the Buddha says that all of that is pretty much a waste of time. And what we should always instead point our mind towards whenever we're experiencing whatever we're experiencing is attending wisely. This is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. When he, she, they attend wisely in this way, 3 fetters are abandoned in them: personality view, doubt, and adherence to rules and observances. These are called the taints that should be abandoned by seeing. So always, always going back to the Four Noble Truths. Looking, this is suffering. This is the cause of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. And this is the way out of suffering. So always, always going back to that. All right, so I think I shared enough with your thoughts that.
Okay, thank you, Ayya, for that wonderful talk. So there's a couple questions already typed in, but if anybody else has any questions, please go ahead and enter them in the live chat, and I'll read them off for Ayya Soma to answer. So first off, hello to a few more friends who are joining in. Hello, Suzanne, Jessica, Claudia, Horatio, Priyanka, Marielle, Drew, John, Sarah, Greeno Bino, Peter, and Rupa. Happy to see all of you checking in again. And we have a question from Melvin. Melvin says, if your intention is to harm someone, but you accidentally benefit them greatly against your plans and wishes, is that negative or positive karma?
Always negative, because your intention is what matters.
And John asks, didn't the Buddha teach that the karmic consequences of wrong thought is less than that of wrong speech or deeds?
No, that's actually the point of that sutta to begin with. That basically once you commit an unwholesome action, Actually, the point is, whenever you have committed an unwholesome action, you've thought about committing the unwholesome action to begin with. So there is no action without a thought beforehand. So that's why the thought of committing a bad action is worse.
And Priyanka asks, does unintentional bad karma bring suffering?
I'm sorry, can you repeat again?
Does unintentional bad karma bring suffering?
What is unintentional bad karma? Karma is by definition intention. So there is perhaps an unwholesome deed that you can do if you are somewhat not quite aware of what you're doing. But fundamentally, there's still karma there. You're still willfully doing something. You're either willfully ignoring the suffering of other people, or you're willfully not cultivating your mind in order to appropriately to make appropriate actions, or you're just not you're not mindful, you're not paying attention. So those are all karmic deeds that will have a retribution.
Then Peter says, the chicken dog story is a beautiful teaching that seeds my mind and ideally is brought up when I have a chicken dog experience with others. Thank you. Your emptiness is a very helpful teacher. Then there's a bunch of sadhus and thank yous. Hello to a few more friends checking in. Hello, Andy, Catalina, Kat Martino. Good to see you all checking in again as well. John Schuster is asking, what sutta is that, please? I think he means the one where the Buddha says wrong thought is worse than wrong speech or wrong action.
It's somewhere in the Majjhima Nikaya. Bhante, who is the Sutta Encyclopedia.
I don't remember off the top of my head, but John, if you send us an email, we'll get you the sutta reference, because I also know the one that she's talking about.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing. When I read it, I was like, did I read that correctly? I think I read it a couple of times and I was like, yeah, he's actually saying that. Oh, that actually does make a lot of sense. It was also quite pertinent because once Bhante and I had this conversation with a white supremacist who claimed he was Buddhist, and it was mind-blowing because he said that since he wasn't acting upon his white supremacist thoughts, there was no problem whatsoever. And I remember actually Bhante explaining to him that the thoughts had a strong karmic consequence. And when you think about it in that perspective, then you're like, is there actually any white supremacist who is acting on these views without having thought about them to begin with? No, it's impossible. That's why it's an ideology.
Melvin asks, Ayya, is it acceptable to refer to a female Buddhist monastic as sister?
So even though I am of the female gender and I happen to be a monastic, I would not like to take the role of sort of official speaker for female monastics. So my advice would be to always ask whether the monastic is female or male or whatever kind of gender or non-gender they identify with. To just ask them, is it okay if I call you sister, Ayya, Kanmo, venerable? How would you like to be addressed? There are so many different titles also across the spectrum of the Buddhist world. So sometimes, generally, I would say in the Theravada tradition, it's safe to call pretty much any male monastic Bhante and pretty much any female monastic Ayya. I am completely fine if people refer to me as sister. I kind of like it because it's like, sister, yo. It's kind of cool. No, I liked it. But some others don't particularly like the sister and brother connotation because for whatever, you know, once you give up so many different things, then you have just all your attachment to all your views and ideologies. So we hold really tightly to these things. You know, it's kind of like my whole shtick with being called nun. Like, oh, such an important deal. I mean, it really isn't. But so I can laugh about it, but at the same time, you know, it's a thing. So I'm still working on letting go of a lot of different attachments. So I would say it's just like a polite thing to ask, like, how would you? Is it okay if I refer to you in that way?
Then Drew says, so the physical action is not worse itself, but the volition. I have the plan to harm. I shall act with this plan. I am acting, embracing anger, ill will. All these come to fruition in the act. Would that not be worse than having the plan, but then choosing not to do it? Less ill will volition? Am I misunderstanding?
Wait, it's too long. English is not
Um,
my first language, so you have to be a little bit slow.
so he says, the physical action is not worse itself, but the volition. I have the plan to harm. I shall act with this plan. I am acting slash embracing anger slash ill will. All these come to fruition in the act. Would that not be worse than having the plan, but then choosing not to do it?
Well, the thing is that the whole point is there wouldn't be any plan. There wouldn't be any action if there weren't a plan to begin with. So a thought arising in the mind. So that's why the thought, it's not about acting or not acting, at least this is my understanding, on the thought itself, but it's actually acknowledging that the thought is there and doing something about it. Because otherwise, it's inevitable that you will be acting in an unwholesome way upon the thought. Do you see what I mean? Like it's if you don't do anything about your distaste for a particular group of people, so about the thought, conceiving that. So if tomorrow I start going like, oh, I really hate I don't know, Chinese people. I don't, by the way. I love Chinese people. But I had to pick an ethnicity. And Jen happens to be Chinese. So if I start thinking about how horrible Chinese people are, and I am completely unaware, like not really reflecting on, okay, this thought is appearing in my mind, and this is harmful. And I have to remove it from my mind by thinking, being okay with the fact that it's a thought and going hand in hand with it, eventually I will act upon it. Do you see what I mean? If it's not within this lifetime, in future lifetimes. Which is why this is my understanding that the Buddha says that we have to be constantly aware in every single moment in what is occurring and happening and appearing in the mind. And you'll see actually that most of the time, you'll see it when you go on a long retreat. The reason why lots of times people like can't take it anymore during retreats, it's because for the first time you're actually sitting in silence and you're seeing this chaos that your mind is producing, that oftentimes it's a horror movie. It's horrible. And you're like, what is this? I don't want to see this. So when we're not in a retreat environment, or we're not in a sort of quarantine environment, which by the way, it's the same kind of thing, which is why a lot of people are having or also struggling a lot, besides the fact that there is a pandemic. A lot of people are struggling by just dealing with themselves all the time. It's because there is no escape. You can't go and distract yourself at the bar. You can't go and distract yourself at whatever kind of sort of entertainment that is out there. So I'll share my experience of that when actually the first time I went on retreat, it was incredible. It was such a blissful experience. I went there and I was like, oh, so lovely, so peaceful, so relaxing. Oh, I love it. Oh yeah. Oh, we're doing metta. Oh, I love everyone. Oh yes, yes, may everyone be happy. Ah, and I was seeing all these people like running away, like mid retreat. It was actually one of those retreats at Bhavana Society where half of the people were leaving, and I was like, "Wow, these people are crazy! Like, it's so blissful here. It's incredible." Then I went back after a couple of months, and I had a less than ideal experience, less than a blissful experience, because all of a sudden there was this woman, a few seats from me, that had a sort of breathing problem. So every, like, I think 45 seconds, she would just make some, like, a really annoying kind of breathing, like, sound with the breath. And I remember at the beginning I was like, and to the point that it built up so much in my mind that I had all these homicidal instincts towards her. I'm not kidding. And I couldn't do anything but look at my mind and see I have homicidal instincts towards someone who only has a respiratory problem. I am utterly insane. I'm a horrible person. I am crazy. And I wanted to leave, like start running and go the hell out of like this retreat, because I couldn't stand seeing that awful trait in my mind, that awful craziness that was happening in the mind. And I've had actually several of these experiences during retreats where awful images, awful emotions have come. Some I could trace, the sort of root origin, and some I couldn't. I was completely clueless. But we all know that we have a lot of rubbish appearing, which is why it's difficult to go on retreat for a long period of time, or to be in isolation for a long period of time. So unless we actually acknowledge, unless we see every single moment, we go like, okay, I want to kill this person right now. That is a harmful thought. That is a horrible thought. And unless I do something to remove that thought and throw it out, I will eventually act upon it. And if you've been practicing for a while, in hindsight, you will see how a lot of the actions, unskillful actions you have done, were because you were completely oblivious of the thoughts that created the foundations for those actions to happen to begin with. So once you start practicing, so my experience of doing a lot of mindfulness of emotions, because I've always dealt with sort of strong, my alter ego has always been Maria Callas, this great opera singer who died a few decades ago. So it has always been difficult for me before my Buddhist practice to just navigate the world without being overcome and like swept away by whatever emotional experience I was having. That has been the biggest gift of Buddhism. So of becoming aware with the processes of mind, becoming aware with the emotions, and going, well, right now I have a fuming, angry mind, but I can decide not to act unskillfully upon it. But it takes time and time and time. And then in hindsight going, yes, I constantly had a fuming, enraged mind, but actually I was just keeping on cultivating that. And not looking at it, unwholesome actions kept on repeating, which is why the strong habit has developed to begin with. So I hope it makes sense. A little Italian-English to this afternoon.
Okay, and thank you, Ayya. Hello, Alicia. Hello, Melinda. Hello, Sense India. Happy you're joining in. Sally says, yes, thank you for the chicken story. Aya taught a method not affected by the emotion, upset, nervous, angry, anxious. After seeing them, how to not be impacted by unwholesome views and emotions. After acknowledging, still hard to let it go, like an addiction.
Mhm. Yeah, it's absolutely an addiction. So once you realize that it's an addiction, you're already on the right track. So of course, with any habit, and the addiction actually is a very pertinent parallel, because we think of addiction as just being addicted to drugs or intoxicants of some sort, but fundamentally, like, a lot of toxic emotions are intoxicants, in fact, too. That's why we call them toxic emotions, hence they're addictive. So we are constantly addicted to the honey tip of it. No different than alcohol. If getting wasted was just an awful experience, nobody in their right mind would get an addiction to alcohol or any kind of intoxicant. There's a lot of pleasantness in getting drunk. That's the honey tip. That's the gratification. And then there is the unpleasant part of it. So the poisonous root. And what we have a problem with, because we're addicted, is seeing a way out, finding a way out. So you're kind of like, okay, this is harmful, this is terrible, no different than anyone who develops an addiction of some sort. And you're like, how the hell am I going to get out of this? So that was kind of like my situation actually before Buddhism. You can say I was addicted to strong emotions of one sort or the other, both in the negative and in the positive side. So I was extremely ambitious in life, not because of anything, because I would have like such a high, like attaining whatever I had in mind. Whenever I would point my mind to something, if it was like a very difficult goal, and I would work day and night, so hard in order to accomplish that, why would I do that? Because at the moment of accomplishing it, I would have this full, mind-blowing emotion, mind-blowing, like, whew. I still remember when I put together this like crazy exhibit on the boardwalk in Rockaway, working so hard for it. And then I remember, at a certain point it was done, and I'm looking at it, and I had this like rush. No different than doing drugs. And I've done drugs in the past. Disclaimer coming out. And yeah, similar high. So I was very much wrapped up with this high, which is why I kept on doing it. But I was also like aware of the harmful state of it. I was unhappy and depressed most of the time. But then I was like, well, what's the way out? Like, how can I just have to deal with being okay that this will be my situation for the rest of my life. But of course, that would also make me extremely depressed, because I was like, do I really want to live a life where I'm depressed most of the time? Bordering suicidal? Do I actually want to do that? I don't know. But no answers. Very difficult. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And then Buddhist practice appeared in my life. And I started, most importantly, practicing it. So reading it, going like, oh, this is smart, and then practicing it. And that's when it's transformational. But of course, it's a trial and error, because you have such strong habits. So it's very easy to fall back into repeating them over and over again. And in the same way, over and over again, you go, okay, I stop. I repeat, what did the Buddha say? I go and I do it. So don't get discouraged, because fundamentally that is, we think that our experience is so unique. That's also what I was sharing with Jen the other day, our resident here. One of the reasons why I ordained was the realization that I was so common. My mind was so common, so banal. I spent most of my life thinking or aiming to be so different. Even my parents would always go like, "Oh, you want to be always so different." Such a like little bubble that I created all these micro bubbles, and to a certain degree I kind of did the same thing in my Buddhist path. I do live in a sort of Buddhist bubble, but then I created a little bubble within the Buddhist microcosm. But besides that, like there was always this idea since I can remember that I was so different from everyone else. And then the more I started practicing Buddhism, the more I realized so banal. I'm just a different shade of greed, hatred, and delusion. But we all fundamentally are dealing with the same thing, universal things, which is why the Buddha never goes too much into depth in like, oh, like it never takes the sort of Western psychology approach of like, oh, well, so if you have a bossy mother, then that means you have this kind of personality. Or if you were raised in Italy and you were born in 1981 and you changed the different, your parents moved a lot, and then you studied fashion, and then you moved to the US, and then you moved to the UK, and then you did this and that, and then you had such and such relationships, and then you had like all these like different, really like unique, particular traits, and you look in a certain way that is very different from that other person, whatever it is, then that means that it has these consequences. No, it's always, he talks about core things, core elements, that it doesn't matter whether you're born in Italy, whether you're born in China, whether you're born in Burma, whether you're born in Colorado, whether you're born in Korea. These are the current residents right now. Doesn't matter if you're like 30, 20, 40, 60, also current ages in an empty cloud monastery. We're all fundamentally sharing a different shade of the same experience, which is marked by greed, hatred, and delusion. So stop feeling special. This would be my recommendation. You're not special. I'm not special. No one's special. We are so ordinary. So all we have to do is just practice, and we all are encountering the same difficulties, and we just are patient with ourselves, and we go, okay, there you go. I'm agitated again to talk in front of the camera. Oh, okay. I am whatever, illiterate again. Oh, okay, that's fine. Oh, I am getting angry again. Okay, well, silly me. Oh, I can't take this anymore again. Okay, silly me. Like, just being gentle, going like, okay, you're unenlightened, but you really are also committed to this path. So, okay, let's try again. No different than, little children when they're learning how to walk. How many times do they fall? They keep on falling and falling and falling and falling and falling and falling and falling. At a certain point, they learn how to walk. But we need to allow them the time to learn how to walk, and also allow them the time to fall. And it's okay. It's part of the process. So in the same way, we deal with ourselves and with others, like with both gentleness, kindness, and also with right effort, going like, okay, well, now it's also the time to get together.
Then Suzanne and Sally both asked the source of the sutta quote. So once again, that's from the Sabbasava Sutta, which is number 2 from the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle length discourses. Melvin followed up on his question about trying to do something bad and accidentally doing something good with an example. He says, so you're trying to kill a Buddha with a rifle, and as you fire, someone else who is trying to stab the Buddha steps in the way, and your bullet hits them, saving the Buddha's life. This is not a positive?
No, because you wanted to kill a Buddha, which is like possibly the biggest bad karma. Now that accidentally you have saved the Buddha, it has no karmic effect in your experience, because you didn't have the intention to actually save the Buddha. You had an intention of harming the Buddha, which is the most harmful the most deleterious bad karma that you can have. Actually, only worse than that is actually killing a Buddha that I'm aware of. But Bante can correct me because he's the Buddhist encyclopedia, Buddhist Wikipedia live. But yeah, I would say that is my understanding. That it, and on top of that, that's also why in the Theravada tradition we take precepts so that we train our mind to stop thinking in these ways, like always finding like the sort of the exception to the rule. Well, killing bad, but, no, there's no buts. We are all delusional. So if we start thinking that there is a right or, sort of right circumstance when it's okay to do unwholesome actions, that's basically what we've done over and over again for countless lifetimes. It brings only bad results. So yeah, don't play that game.
Okay, and Tulia asks, I am having difficulties with haters. So my instinct is to teach them a more equidistanced way of looking at things, but it's better to let go. What do you think?
Well, so haters that hate her or haters in general?
It doesn't say.
So I would say that the best thing is instead of teaching people is to, as in teaching a lesson to people, is to lead by example. That is the most effective way to pretty much affect any kind of change in the world. So if you start lecturing people, you also have to look at your experience of the world. Like in the times when you've been not terribly skillful, when you've done unwholesome actions, has it ever been terribly effective for someone to come and lecture you? Oh, you shouldn't be doing this, or you shouldn't be doing that, or you shouldn't be doing this, or you shouldn't be doing that. So I'll give you an example. For example, prior to starting Buddhist Insights, I was very much into food activism, let's say, in some shape or form. So I was always trying to like get people to be a little bit more woke in understanding the sort of situation, the horrible agricultural situation, and the implications that the horrible agriculture in this country has on the livelihood of so many different people, communities, and ultimately also the health of us and sentient beings and animals, etc. So I was constantly harassing people and harassing both on social media, like constantly complaining, being, the virtual activist, annoying activist, like sharing like how awful this corporation is and how awful that other corporation is. I remember getting a message from a friend of mine from Italy that was getting all these sort of notifications from Facebook, and was like, are you done with your like crusades against like fruit juice companies? Like, what is this thing that you're doing online that I'm getting notifications from? Because apparently I was like really upset with some corporation that had whatever bad policies, and I was like writing these things on their Facebook page, which for the algorithm was then like making it public worldwide. But anyway, I was kind of like at a certain point perceived that this really annoying person. I also organized the CSA, and I also did a lot of like actual kind of good deeds that did bring benefit to a few people, but fundamentally I was quite unpleasant. Also, lots of my friends were like, okay, enough with this thing. Like, okay, I understand. I mean, I love you, but really. Then we started Buddhist Insights, and there was no official kind of communication in terms of food and how people should source their food, or what kind of economy they should be supporting versus all my different ideas. But because I had so much knowledge about that, then it wasn't inconceivable for me to just go and shop at. Back then I was a layperson, so to go and get the cheapest food available, and who cares what we're feeding to these people, because there's no price tag and we don't have a budget, etc. No, we kind of made things work, and managed to get really wholesome produce and support local organic farmers in the area. And by leading by example, without actually putting any kind of labels here or there, it has been one of the biggest teachings, actually, because I realized that a lot of people then started becoming very interested in how we were doing things, how we were going, how we were, as much as we can, zero waste. So how basically we live at Buddhist Insights, at Empty Cloud Monastery now, and before at the Rockaway Summer House, and started slowly shifting, or actually quickly, I would say, shifting a lot of their habits towards more wholesome choices. And I remember thinking, wow, all I had to do was actually create an example for others, rather than telling them what to do. Creating a sort of option, embodying wholesome belief systems. So it's the same whenever you're surrounded by haters. If you start hating the haters, all you're doing is creating the example, basically becoming a mirror. But if you stop hating and you mimic other wholesome, you embody other wholesome mind states, then there will be a better sort of domino effect. You'll have the kind of better reaction. And I'll give you a very quick example of that with my parents. So we had all my entire life, like, really bad habit, which I was completely oblivious of harsh speech. So they would say something really harsh to me, or at least I thought that they were always the ones starting. They have the perception that I'm the one starting it all the time. So we basically, as I say, play ping pong. Say something harsh to me, boom. I say something harsh. And then we keep on going, like, oh, I would say, oh, my parents, so harsh. And my parents, oh, she's so harsh. Our daughter's so harsh. So with my Buddhist practice, at a certain point, I became aware of this pattern. And my dad, when I ordained, said something really harsh to me, as he normally does. And instead of playing ping pong with him, even though I have the sort of instinct, I was like, oh, let me drop it. And I said something nice and sweet, with also a really nice, gentle voice instead of my usual voice. So I was like, oh, my dad was like, you are the biggest disappointment I've ever had. And I was like, oh, I'm really sorry that you feel this way, because I'm actually quite happy. I think I had an even better voice, right, than like gentler. And I still remember that moment because there was a pause in the conversation, because my dad was expecting the ball to come back to him, but nobody had hit the ball. So he was like, oh, hesitance. And now we can actually have pleasant conversations on the phone. So I've been calling my parents on a regular basis during this pandemic, and I would say 99% of the time we have pleasant conversations on the phone. It's incredible. Great result. So yeah, we have to always remember that in order to affect any kind of change, we first have to lead by example.
Okay, and the last question, Sally says, Ayya, may I ask what you mean by not acting on emotions after seeing them? Could you please explain more about this?
Yes, absolutely. So so the reason why we do a lot of meditation is to familiarize the mind with the workings of the mind. So familiarizing the mind with the mind itself. And we do so in a situation where there's not much going on. That's why it's very beneficial, because there's very few sources of distraction, as opposed to when you're interacting with others, there's a lot going on. So in meditation practice, very little going on, and you train the mind with the workings. As you do this over and over again, and in particular, so if you do it with mindfulness of emotions, so you become aware of the raw feeling of each emotion. So if you're experiencing anger, you go, okay, this is what anger feels like. And then just stay with the raw physical sensation of anger and seeing it arising, ceasing, disappearing, transforming, tingling, becoming something kind of sharp, or whatever kind of sensation you're feeling. You become acquainted with it. Then if agitation arises, you label it first, and then you stay with the raw sensation over and over again. So you practice this way. Then it will come to a point that when you're interacting on a day-to-day basis with others, and these emotions will arise, you will be able to identify them straight away because you are familiar with them. So normally at the very beginning of the practice, if you're like me, I would become aware of my anger afterwards, perhaps during and after. So during, I'm like, whoa, I hate this, and then afterwards going like, whoa, that was a little bit over the top, wasn't it? Whoopsie. But now, as soon as it is arising, I go, oh, I see you. Anger, I see you. Or Mara, I see you. And then I go and I see that I actually have a choice. I have the choice to fuel the anger. So if it's a fire, say like in a kind of chimney, fire in the chimney, so I can go, okay, so I have, on one hand, I have some paper and wood. And on the other hand, I have water. So do I want to like throw wood? Actually, I guess the most pertinent is gasoline, something, right? Is that? So gasoline or water. So basically that's the choice. And you'll see the habit pulling you towards the gasoline, but your right view pulling you towards the water. So you start going like this, gasoline, no water, oh, gasoline, no water, ah! And it's like a real struggle. So sometimes you'll go like, you throw the gasoline and it's like, and you're like, oh, whoops, I did it again, whoops. But sometimes you're skillful and you're like, water, ceased, and you're like, oh, wow, the Buddha's right. Oh, this is like very comfortable, also very skillful. Oh, peace. So then you start cultivating a little bit more the habit of throwing water to it. But even when you're throwing the gasoline, when the habit becomes strong again, and you're like, who cares? Whatever. You're doing it in an aware state, which then creates the conditions for experientially understanding what the Buddha is talking about. Not just reading it in a book and going, oh, okay, that sounds cute and nice, and I'll talk about it with my friends, whatever, on a Zoom chat and blah blah. Like, oh yeah, I read more suttas than you. Oh yeah, I'm smarter than you. Like, blah blah blah. But actually, no one is really practicing these things. There is no point in reading and absorbing information and listening to Dhamma talks unless you actually take the time to practice these, both in sort of formal meditation and in day-to-day meditation. Your entire life has to be meditation practice, because you're constantly looking at your mind and putting it in line with Dhamma and comparing it with Dhamma and seeing, how is this relevant to me?
Okay, well, that's the end of the questions. There's a bunch of thank yous and sadhus and so on. So I think we should go ahead and close at this time. So for those who are joining the remote retreat today, Melinda says today is the 26th anniversary of taking refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Congratulations, Melinda.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
So a bunch more thank yous and sadhus are coming in. Peter says, your talk was clear, down to earth, practical, and knowledgeable. There's a bunch of praise, but I'm not going to read through it all. Anyway, so now we're going to do walking and sitting meditation. So you can take a 5-minute break, and then we'll do some walking meditation. And the idea was floated earlier of live streaming us here at the monastery doing meditation to help give you some encouragement.
Maybe we can ask people if it's helpful for them or not to live stream it and keep it, so then we can have a sort of democratic consensus. Because last weekend we didn't live stream our personal practice, but we thought that maybe perhaps this afternoon we could live stream it if it was helpful for people to kind of virtually meditate together.
Yeah, so if anybody wants us to live stream us doing walking meditation and sitting meditation, please note it will be silent. There will be no instructions. It will just be a live video of monks doing walking and sitting meditation. Is anybody interested in that? If not, we just won't do it. But if people want it, then it's something we can do. So now's your chance. Exercise your right to vote.
And maybe we can, in the meanwhile, disconnect the Facebook, because I don't think they're interested.
Okay, so we have Junie, Melinda, Tulia, Victoria are all saying yes. Okay, well, should we do it then?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and mute the microphone on our end. And we'll take a short break, and then we'll rearrange the camera a little bit so you can watch us do walking and sitting meditation. And hopefully you will also be doing walking and sitting meditation on your end. So the idea here is not just to watch us meditate, but to actually meditate with us. So I hope you're not just like putting on a jamming soundtrack and watching the monks walk back and forth, but that you're actually doing the walking meditation at the same time.
And we will unmute whenever we ring the bell.
Yeah. So Melvin also says he wants a wide angle view of the temple. We'll see. Anyway, so go ahead and take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back for a walking meditation.
Great.
Thank you. Like moment thing, I want to walking meditation.
Walking meditation. sitting meditation. walking meditation.
sitting meditation. So at this time, you can take a break until 6 o'clock. And then at 6 o'clock, please continue with your meditation practice. And our next live session will be at 7:30. So at 7:30, we'll do the Ratana Sutta chanting. And after the chanting, we'll have our first episode of Monk Chat. So please come with things that you'd like to chat with the monks about, and we'll have Monk Chat. Yay! Okay, see you at 7:30.
And well done to everyone who meditated with us. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Yeah, so I'm quite impressed that you all stuck with it and practiced with us through the afternoon. So congratulate yourselves. All right, see you next time.